It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 306. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
That's 3 times 102.
Godra.
Hello.
Tam.
Oh.
Phelan.
Or 6 times 51.
I mean, sure. Okay, quick aside. I have a problem with Final Fantasy V since it's Four Job Fiesta time.
I
want to take a guess where I am in the game and what level I'm at.
You're at the Ancient Library at level 20.
Oh, no, not even.
Oh, I was going to say level 15, but level 20 would mean you were grinding a lot.
I was going to say, this is Bell. Bell grinds
wait. You guys aren't. No.
Let me rephrase that. You haven't gotten the water crystal, and you are level 25.
No, it's not quite that bad. I have not boarded the fire ship, and I am level 23.
That's...
You're insane.
This is a ridiculous level of grinding that is not required for anything in this game.
I just find it relaxing before bed. Then I fall asleep. Like, I'm just playing before bed. And
Are you at least grinding dogs for money?
I have so much money, it's not even, like...
it almost doesn't matter what he was grinding. He has those levels. There's been a silly amount of grind.
I've been selling turtle shells for money.
I mean, to be fair, there is a reason to grind like that, and it's if you only
plan on going to samurai.
Well, no. It's if you only have black mages and you want to be able to heal yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I should.
You hitting level 20-ish usually.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've got Blue Mage and I've got Mystic Knight because I bought Mystic Knight instead of dealing with a Berserker. Because, I mean, I don't know. Like, it seemed like a reasonable option given what I currently had. And my Mystic Knights are all leveled up to 5. My Blue Mages are all level 4. So, yeah, I have a problem. I'm never going to make it through this game.
I mean, so how do you think this is a problem with the game?
It's a problem with me. Like, I have a problem with this game. Like, it is a problem in me with this game. I just find it relaxing. But anyway, yeah, I thought y'all would find that humorous.
I will say I did not expect the depths that you had gone to.
Well, okay, you remember the one year when I beat it? Kodra was trying to figure out... You were trying to figure out the dark math of how I got to have that much health?
Yes.
Anyway, so we had a topic from last week that kind of got briefly touched upon, but then we didn't have enough time. Guild Wars 1 and the deck building system.
So, yes, Guild Wars 1 is a mostly unique idea in MMOs, such as MMOs are, I guess, in that most of its character building concept is in its ability to make character builds just by selecting 8 skills.
Okay.
It's your deck.
But this is not like 8 skills out of 16. This is 8 skills out of several hundred.
Sure. Is there a restriction on what those 8 skills can be based on what equipment you're using or what class you are?
What class you are. Okay. Every class has at least 4 trait lines, essentially, skill lines. You put points into those skill lines and it improves the skills in that line. You also have a secondary profession that you have access to most of its
level
skill
10?
lines.
I think it's level 10 is when you get that.
Depends on the campaign. You can get it at level... I think you can get it at level 1 if you're in the original campaign.
It's a story-based thing when you finally unlock it. You have to go to a specific place where all the trainers are. So I guess if you just rushed over there, you could maybe get there at level 1.
You're not supposed to... you're supposed to get it between, level 2 and level 3. It's real early. You can't change it, however, until a second story-based thing later, which happens even after max level. You have access to all of that class's skill lines as well, except for you don't have access to their primary skill line, which varies. It has some particular signature skills to that class in it. And you don't have access to those classes' runes on gear. So you can't improve them past level 12, which is the point which you can't, the max number of points you can put into something normally. So your primary class's skill lines can be better than your secondary classes.
So am I misremembering this, but weren't there like multiple versions of the same ability that like got better?
Not really. So Guild Wars had a lot of balance patches over the years. There were some duplicate skills where this was the same skill with a different name in different campaigns. But for the most part, things didn't upgrade. Your starting abilities remained good basically forever. And in some cases, there's a disincentive to trying other builds, but that's a separate thing.
Right. But over time, like, there were some... What I remember was that there were some, like, quests or bosses or whatever that if you completed them, they would get you a new skill. And a lot of times the skill that you would get would be like, oh, if I have this skill, it turns on these 4 other skills, and now I have a whole build. And so it's like go out and hunt for new skills, because those skills unlock.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Because like I distinctly remember finding skills throughout the world while I was questing.
Yeah.
Yes. In the original campaign, a lot of your skills come from doing skill quests. And some of these have a fairly natural progression. Like the warrior one that I remember is you have an adrenaline-based skill that causes bleeding. So once you've hit something like 3 times, you can use this skill and it will cause bleeding. Then you have one that takes like an adrenaline-based skill that takes an additional hit, I want to say, that causes some other debuff if your target you hit is bleeding. So that first skill is the attack you needed to get the other skill online, assuming you started from nothing. And they synergize perfectly with each other, and that goes a long way for making Warrior successful in the early game.
Yeah.
I struggled a lot because I kept trying to make Necromancer Warrior work, or actually Warrior Necromancer. And like, I think it absolutely does work later, but like you have to have a bunch of skills to make it work.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, was that since you can combine any 2 classes, you can like main and sub any 2 classes together. A lot of times, like making that make any sense at all was dependent on some skill or another.
A lot of the primary trait lines have something to do with energy management. Like Elementalist is energy storage, it just increases their max energy. Rangers is expertise, it decreases the amount things cost. And Necromancer is soul reaping, so they get energy as things die. Warrior is somewhat disadvantaged that their primary is strength, which increases all melee damage you do, but doesn't do anything for energy, which is why a lot of warrior skills have alternate costs. Yeah, but it makes them synergize not great with certain other things.
I don't remember what Mesmer is, if it's a regen.
Mesmer was fast casting.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mesmer doesn't have something that manipulates energy. It has casting speed, which is why you want to go.
Their inspiration trait line affects energy.
Yeah. Energy being the equivalent of mana or stamina anywhere else.
Yeah, you decided to use a universal term since all classes use the same bar. So there were some winners, some duds. Eventually they introduced other classes to add other abilities and other weapon types. That was one of the things that went very well for warriors, is access to things like scythes and daggers.
And having other classes that it can sub.
The big thing was the sheer amount of possibilities created by this system is gigantic.
Yeah.
Like overwhelmingly gigantic. And a lot of them were not good. But it was interesting to go through and find, hey, this ability works with this class's particular specialty, and I can make a pet work with a mesmer and things that attack my pet. Things try to attack my pet, so I can put anti-attack things on my pet. And this whole combination works really well.
Sort of a build your own class type of deal.
Pretty much, yeah. And like I use Magic the Gathering as the example here, because the kinds of things that you can do were really only slightly influenced by your class. Like if you're like, oh, I'm playing green or I'm playing white in Magic, like that gives you some idea of what's going on, but it doesn't like define your play style as strongly as like I play a rogue in WoW does.
Yeah, you would usually need a different descriptor to even like tell what your game plan is if you're describing a Magic deck.
Yes, and that's
I
absolutely.
can tell you I'm playing an IW Mesmer, and that tells you something.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly how Guild Wars 1 builds looked, is like you'd often see the class just because the class did matter, but it was like I'm doing a healing mesmer. I'm doing a control energy management mesmer. I'm doing a blaster flame out elementalist.
So one of the things about, magic decks are one thing, but I imagine it's even worse here, is like there's the concept in Magic of like a build around where you're saying, hey, this card is really cool, but maybe it requires some work to get going, but if it gets going, it's going to be really awesome and powerful.
So the thing I just said a second ago, IW Mesmer, is a build based around a skill called Illusionary Weaponry.
That's kind of what I was imagining would be the thing. And then my follow-on is how, like, for those...
How many of these are awful?
Well, no. For those very important build-around skills, how accessible are they to players?
Mostly they're elite skills, which means that you need to find a boss that has the skill, kill that boss, and use a Signet of Capture on it, which takes up a spot in your skill bar until you do so.
Yeah, you have to go, like, specifically hunting it.
Right.
And they do make sure to provide you with elite skills, like, in the course of normal play.
So
one of the early tutorials is, this is a Signet of Capture, go use it. Here's a boss.
Are elite skills a limited resource in your build allocation?
You may have one elite skill on your bar.
So what I'm also hearing is elite skills. This is kind of why I enjoy brewing in Commander and don't enjoy brewing in Standard as much. Elite skills sound like they strongly will influence your build.
Yes.
Yes. Just for funsies, ArenaNet added something like 10 elite skills to the game this past year, just to shake up the meta.
Oh, neat. Yeah, like, this is kind of... There's sort of the idea of when you're building something like this, that having something to ground yourself against, like, I want to make, as you just said, IW Mesmer. I want to build something around this elite skill that is going to be very powerful and very important in defining to my character is really nice, because when you're just looking at a list of, I don't know, a couple thousand cards, it can get a little overwhelming trying to figure out how to put 60 together without any guiding star.
And that was what I thought was really, really clever about Guild Wars 1, is that most of your build was around your elite skill, and the most exciting things to go out and get were elite skills. And so it was like, oh, I happened to hop in this group and we killed this boss and I got his skill. This unlocks a whole bunch of other build options for me. And so it was
at the start, you don't have any elite skills, so your skills are going to be based around your starting skills. But that is a completely functional and useful thing, because the starting skills are good for pretty much every class. The elementals ones used to be bad, but they fixed that a while back.
So I will say, a game that kind of does this, and I need to stress kind of, because I imagine it's not to the scale, I think would be Elder Scrolls Online, right? Where
only in some severely limited cases.
Yeah.
I mean, you presume you do have access to skills from a whole bunch of different sources.
Yes, you do.
You do basically get to pick what skills you put on your bar.
My experience with ESO builds is they are defined way more heavily by their weapon than anything else.
Okay. That's
but not to the same extent as Guild Wars 2, but pretty close.
I would say either weapon or class. Because I guess my build that I am running is the weapon almost can be interchangeable. I'm mostly just because I'm kind of playing I'm playing a stamina healer as the pet class. I don't even remember what it's called. The Warden.
Yeah, whereas like for me, I would say the vast majority of what I use are weapon abilities, and I don't use that many Dragonite abilities. I basically like have green blood as my oh shit heal, but the majority of everything is sword and board abilities.
I guess I do have a build around in that game because I have a werewolf build. So I just have some dual swords for the time in between me being able to use werewolf.
Again, that's one of those things where I find it interesting because I don't actually think ESO has been adding skills at maybe the rate of something like what a Guild Wars 2 would, to allow you to really have that breadth of options. And maybe that's just
most of their skills added that I can think of have been, I guess, not entirely combat focused. The thing they added is gear. They like to add extra set options and gear options.
Interesting. And I'm not really at the point where I understand how gear looks in the like high level play of that game.
Well, I think the most interesting thing about the way the gearing works is like your crafted sets that have been around since day one are still completely valid. They're not like invalidated by sets that came out later.
I mean, every so often they get heavily nerfed, but it's not that often.
Right, but like there's a, I don't know, it's when an expansion comes out or a new dungeon or a new whatever comes out, the set gear that is in that isn't so phenomenally better than anything else that it just like breaks the meta and you only ever use the new items.
Yeah, a lot of time a new thing that will come out will, reinvigorate one of those old sets.
Right. Well, and it's basically given ESO a lot of horizontal progression, a lot like Guild Wars 2 is, where, I mean, like, I have effectively had in-game gear, God, for years now, and there's no real need for me to go get new gear.
That's interesting. The other game that I thought of was The Secret World when you were describing this.
The Secret World wanted to be this, yes.
Yeah.
It didn't get it right.
Yeah. So were there, like, passive abilities as well?
No, Guild Wars 1 does not have passive abilities.
Oh, okay.
I guess that's not entirely fair. There are some related to gear.
Like, unique passive abilities related to gear?
Yes.
Okay.
Mostly, I mean, gear in that game is a weird state of being mostly craftable and or tradable.
I mean, this sounds...
Like you trade a bunch of equipment to a vendor and you get gear. A bunch of raw materials rather to a vendor and you get gear.
Interesting. That's so one way to craft
sort of
stuff.
Like to have a crafting, yeah. Sort of like to have a crafting system.
It's effectively a token system. Kind of like, Darkness Falls and Dark Age of Camelot was that way, to where like you collected tokens in the quote unquote raid zone and then turned in for specific items. Except for in this case, the tokens look like crafting items. But they're effectively just tokens.
So is this one of those things where we have a number of games that have kind of tried this, but no one's really hit the marks as high as Guild Wars 1 did it?
We do. Guild Wars 2 didn't really even try. We did talk about that a bit at the end of last week.
Yeah.
WildStar tried. Secret World tried.
I mean, I think part of the problem is that, and this is sort of, we could talk about this in a lot of other CCGs, is you're having to release a whole bunch of front-end content to keep people playing your game versus this much older game that has tons of abilities and tons of exciting things, and it all makes sense.
Still needs a jump button. Still needs a jump button.
I mean, okay, sure, it still needs a jump button, but I guess my point is, like, it's hard to compete with something that has such a broad range of options at your disposal. I think this is a problem a lot of CCGs run into, where in their like early states, when they've only released like a single core set, it's hard to build like a whole bunch of super well differentiated decks that interact with each other in interesting ways, which is something that you can do when you've got 25, 30 years of cards in your back catalog.
Well, and I think the other problem that we've not really talked about is that as a new player, Guild Wars 1 was super obtuse. It did not do a good job of explaining things. And as a result,
New player.
Well, but as a result, like it
stays
had
that way, unfortunately.
it had a very low adoption rate. Lots of people tried Guild Wars 1. Not that many people stuck around. Like it had a very devoted player base, but it was a relatively small player base. And I think that's why we saw a lot of changes with Guild Wars 2, because, obviously this thing that worked really well wasn't real approachable either.
I mean, I'm not sure I would say Guild Wars 2 is the most approachable game in the world.
But it's more approachable than Guild Wars 1.
It is significantly more approachable than Guild Wars 1.
Well, and Guild Wars 2 does a pretty good job of its initial onboarding, basically up until it's like, okay, here's like the first like hint at serious content. Up until that point, it is very approachable.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
And I think that's sort of a relic of I'm more and more convinced that there was a clear mental model for group play in Guild Wars 2. It was just not well communicated. And because it is so...
By which do you mean that they're intentionally communicated the opposite?
Well, yes. Like, it's a very different approach than most other MMOs as far as what to expect from group play and like what group play is designed for. And their marketing did not do it any favors in that regard. But there's nothing really making it explicit or explaining what that group play is supposed to look like. And like FF14 does the opposite thing, where it has extremely regimented group play, like to a incredible degree, but it tells you exactly what to expect. If you are this class, this is what you do. These are the things you should care about. Do them. You are this class. You will do these things. This is what you want to pay attention to.
If you're a warrior, it's all about breaking rocks.
Well, but even, I mean, class quests are one thing, but also the like intro, what are they, guild hests?
Yeah.
Those intro quests are really, really explicit about, hey, here are some common mechanics you'll see. You should have your tank hold aggro. You should not be hit. You should heal the tank. And I think that where Guild Wars 2's group content fell over, especially when we first tried it, was it didn't really explain what were designers thinking when they put it all together.
So there is like, and part of this I think is the mythology we tell ourselves. Like, I remember the stories from like early MMOs with bosses that were put in and designers had no idea how you were supposed to kill them. And then it was this big legend of these players who fought these impossible bosses and came up with creative solutions and eventually won.
Is there any game that actually has that be true other than FF11?
I mean, EverQuest, the original EverQuest was very much that way.
And
okay.
UO is the other game I hear those stories about.
But the thing about EverQuest is it's like it was a sequence of breaking the encounters.
The same was also true for these stories in FF11.
Yep.
And in, I mean, that the same is true in UO, although UO was a different beast and didn't really have PvE content.
I mean,
for the most
to
part.
Be fair,
it had roaming around killing things.
Yeah.
That's what it had.
The beginning of Guild Wars 2 was very much breaking the encounters. That's what you did in dungeons.
Yeah, well, that's what I think is really interesting is that if you don't provide like this is how you should do this, players will find like players are like water; they will take the path of least resistance everywhere. And if the path of least resistance is established, they will take the fastest path of least resistance if possible. And so I get the impression that early Guild Wars 2, and the reason that everybody did dungeons as like teleportation, mesmer, stealth exploits was just because like it wasn't clear enough how you were supposed to do it for that to enter the zeitgeist.
Well, because so there are tools in the game, but none of them were clearly explained. Like in a traditional Trinity game, like there's clear explanation of what you're supposed to do. This one holds the threat. This one heals the wounds. This one deals the damage. And that's a dumbed down version of the roles that existed in like Dark Age of Camelot or EverQuest, because there were a lot more roles than just the 3, but it's an oversimplified version of the roles. And I think Guild Wars never really explained, like, these are the things you need to go into a dungeon with. Well, like, and it's variable. Like, it's probably deeply variable what you bring, but you need some things to be successful.
I think it's really interesting because I don't feel like until we got to so WoW might have been doing this with the developer intent, but it isn't really until we get to like Final Fantasy 14 where we see people saying this is explicitly your role. Like you have a blue icon, you are a tank. You have a green icon, you are a healer. You have a red icon, you deal damage.
WoW absolutely did that, just not by class.
Yeah. Same with EverQuest.
Well,
I mean, EverQuest did it by class, but
WoW initially also did it by class, but
I was going to say WoW, but it wasn't explicitly part of the game. It was that was all meta.
Yeah, I mean, roles in WoW in some cases weren't necessarily the role they envisioned for that class. Even it seemed like paladins and dresses.
I mean, like rogue tanks were a thing. It was a legit spec you could do.
Yeah. Druids were only allowed to heal, even though they had, bear and cat forms.
Yeah. Like all of that was not, this is the developer intent. This is the meta that was built around that.
Like there was developer intent for shamans to have some tanking ability. Nothing came of that.
But I think that the difference there is that even if you didn't know what a given class could do, if you went into a dungeon knowing what your group needed.
Yeah.
Like you knew that you needed a tank, you needed a healer, you needed DPS.
Sure.
Well, and I got to admit, like early on in WoW, we knew these roles existed, but we didn't know which classes could and couldn't do them because I tanked a lot of stuff as a hunter. Like I would have my pet tank stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
my pet had a taunt. It can tank.
I tanked I tanked Sunken Temple as a hunter.
I did most of my dungeons leveling up on Dynar. I did with a paladin tank, and I think the paladin was also healing themselves.
By the time I started, it was Burning Crusade, and at that point, paladins and druids were actually sanctioned tanks.
Yeah, but Burning Crusade is really when I feel like roles got solidified. Like, it felt like there was this unanswered understanding of what a role was, but even that, like, there was some wiggle room. Like, our raid wiggled with that. Like, we would absolutely incorporate paladins tanking and bears tanking into our raids, even if that wasn't, like, approved orthodox meta.
Well, so, like, having experienced EverQuest, and hopefully Tam can back me up on this one, EverQuest is a game that had one official tank class, Warrior. There were tank classes that could also tank. And in fact, some of them were actually better tanks than Warriors. But there was a clear line in the sand that Sony expected Warriors to be the tank. I mean, Shadow Knights, I thought were a way better tank than a Warrior was. But they were always relegated to off-tank. So if you look at, like, World of Warcraft, I think that's why we have this clear separation during the vanilla era of main tank, which was warrior, and off tank roles.
Yeah, well, and there was a design philosophy for a while, like around EverQuest and sort of that era, the just barely pre-WoW era that super significantly influenced vanilla WoW, where the idea was that every class's numbers, basically like if you gave a class a rating for everything it could do, all of those numbers needed to be equal. So you might be, if you were a warrior, you might be 100 points of tank. If you were a Shadow Knight, you might be 75 points of tank and 25 points worth of DPS.
Right.
If you were a, rogue, you might be 100 points of DPS or whatever the case may be. And it was
the
like
class designs that I like to play suffered a lot under this philosophy.
Right. Well,
it's a terrible philosophy, objectively.
But if you go back to like EverQuest and you look at the healers, you had clerics were the real healer. Like they were the official sanctioned healer. Then you had druids and shaman that had utility, but were never going to be anywhere as good of a healer. Like,
druids were camp drivers.
They could top off the raid, but they weren't your tank healer. Like,
yeah.
The only thing I know about druid and EverQuest is that a speed buff.
Pretty much.
Spirit of Wolf.
Teleports.
Actually, Spirit of Wolf was a shaman spell.
Oh,
like it's a level 10 shaman spell. Druids got it later. Like everybody associates it with druids because druids are the teleports. Druids also like were soloable. That was the big thing of why people played druids. It's like you can teleport around the world, you can solo.
In WoW, like there were a couple of things. Like one of the reasons why would you bring other classes? Well, those classes bring buffs that are unique to those classes, and those buffs are important to the raid.
That was much, much later.
In WoW?
Yeah. Like that was after Blackwing Lair.
I thought Paladins had blessings from the jump.
I mean, there was blessings in Bloodlust.
And Druids had Innervate from the jump.
If you go 31 into balance.
Which everyone had to do. And it was awful. Every Druid hated it, but every Druid did it because it was kind of the reason to bring a Druid. It was the most attractive thing Druids brought to raids. Was just the ability to sustain the mana pools of your healing base. Because mana pools were a big issue in that point of raiding.
Yeah, healing rotations were huge.
Yeah. Well, and
downranking was a thing.
And
for anybody that came along later, downranking was the practice of basically using lower level healing spells instead of the high levels of healing spells, because in a lot of cases they were more efficient for topping people off.
Because back then, healing spells had different mana costs at different ranks, and you had access to all the ranks lower than your highest one. This is no longer the case. This hasn't been the case for a long, long time.
Good.
But it absolutely was back then.
They also were slightly less efficient at really low levels, but they were also faster.
That speed's often changed.
Healing touch rank 4.
So that's why you would have lower levels of healing touch, because they would not take
3.5 seconds to cast.
3.5 seconds. What is even that about? How can you predict? I mean, in modern games, where would you even be able to predict how to apply 3.5 seconds of
complete heal?
Let me tell you about the 12 seconds it took to cast complete heal.
Yeah, but you were like literally rotate. Like that was an actual healer rotation. Where like, all right,
it was.
I'm gonna
complete heal now.
I'm casting
the funny thing about it is like once I started doing Trank, dude, I was on top of rotations because I'd been doing it as a cleric.
Yeah. Yep. I hated
that. Doesn't surprise me.
I hated complete heal rotations.
It's also why I've never played a healer since. Like, it broke me on healers. I realize that's not the state of healers anymore, but like, no, it just broke me.
It took me years to come back to playing a healer after that. I played exclusively healers for the first like 5 MMOs that I played. Like and it's always very funny to me that people are like, "Oh yeah, I think of you as a rogue," because like I played a healer for most of my MMO career. The complete reheal rotations broke me.
I find I really like healing if it is depending on the state of healing in that game. Like
SWTOR broke me.
What was I want to say it was Pandaria. I did some like early raid healing of Pandaria, and it was basically everything was constantly on fire at all times. Like you never had even a moment to collect yourself. You needed to be pressing buttons at every possible second so that the raid didn't completely fall apart on you. Like there was no moment of breathing there.
I feel like that's a situation of people who aren't healers designing healer content.
Yeah.
Like just straight up, like no healer that I have ever known wants to play StarCraft instead of like healing. And that's basically like what a lot of those eras of healing were, where it's like, oh God, you've got to like hardcore micromanage everything at all times or the raid dies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is like a thing that a soapbox I've gotten on more than once, but like the biggest problem with healing design is there's a cap. At a certain point, you are doing enough healing, and then there's nothing if you're just a pure healer, there's nothing you can do to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a problem because it makes healing trivial / boring or frustrating and difficult depending on where you are on that curve.
Yep.
And
I feel like that's not true of any other role.
I mean, to some extent, like, I don't know, tanking goes through phases. Like
sometimes tanking is like that, and sometimes it isn't.
It isn't. Yeah, it's like basically either you are threatening or fighting for threat, and oh god, I can't hold all these lemons.
I feel like you kind of hit on what I was going to say. Is like if what tanking is applying abilities to try and optimize threat, then yeah, tanking is kind of miserable like that. But if what tanking is I get to be the person that the boss is focused on, and so now my focus is on trying to take as little damage as possible from the boss. Then it's a little bit less then it's a little bit more manageable and a little bit more interesting.
Well, and it's one of those.
I think it's the difference between dungeon tanking and raid tanking. Like, because in raid tanking, the threat modifier is enough to hold the target forever, and you are trying to time your cooldowns in such a way as to save healer mana. But like in dungeons, it's all about holding threat from the DPS and moving quickly and shifting targets and
I think that I think that one of the things that Guild Wars 2 tried to do, I don't think successfully, but I feel like, or I don't feel like successfully initially, but I feel like is a good thought is what if DPS wasn't a role?
Mm-hmm.
Because if DPS isn't a role and everybody is doing damage in addition to whatever else they're doing, then you can get rid of then every class has, I can do a little bit better by eking out a little bit more damage. How can I do that? There's always a improvement, like a improvement spectrum for everybody.
But I think what they didn't get in that equation is that there are some people that don't want to do damage, that they just want to heal or they just want to take the damage. Like that is a role that people, enjoy of a certain stripe. Like I am a mediocre as hell DPS. I do not care about making numbers go up. I just could not give a shit about it. I like holding threat. I like holding aggro and soaking the damage for my party. I like feeling like I'm protecting the party. So like the whole, yes, I am also sort of tanking, but also sort of dealing damage. Like, it's not for me. Like I if I'm going to tank, I want to tank.
And that's one of the things that I
because-
think they got better over time is that you can make you can make a healer that's doing the thing that I think makes sense for healers to do in addition to healing, and you could also do as a
Just
tank.
providing buffs.
I provide buffs or debuffs.
Right.
Like
And
my job
that's-
is not damage; it's buff/debuff uptime. And
It's making everybody else do more damage.
Yeah,
Which is what I've been playing recently.
Yeah.
Trying to play recently.
Either helping everybody else do more damage or controlling the fight. Like not only as a tank, and as a tank you're in a great position to do this, where you say, not only is this thing going to pay attention to me, but I'm going to stack up on control abilities, and that way I can smack it down when I need to hit control stuff. And like crowd control abilities are super relevant in Guild Wars 2 in a way that they just aren't in any other MMO anymore.
I was actually going to ask: is there like the ability to get an enemy to focus on you? And granted, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to do the other thing. But is that something that you can really build around a character around in this?
Somewhat, yes. So 2 things.
It's stunned.
In dungeons and raids, although in raids, absolutely 100% of the time, but in dungeons, usually, mobs tend to go towards the person with the highest toughness.
Yeah, that's why when we were running that one dungeon, when we were running that dungeon last night, mobs tended to go to Ash or me.
Yeah. Is it just that there's so much AoE going on that...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
At least in random pulls? Yes, absolutely.
I was like...
Control rules the day there.
Yeah.
More than aggro rules.
Right. So as a tank in Guild Wars 2, you're going to want to use some kind of a weapon that gives you a palette of control abilities.
I was thinking about the oil and fire fight.
That fight was just dumb.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
there was
Also, most of the damage in that fight, except for the fire dude who occasionally threw out a single target bolt of nonsense, most of the damage in that fight was passive.
Which was really interesting because they definitely fixated on me, and I have no good explanation for why that happened.
Oil guy basically did no damage on his own, but he would occasionally shoot people, apparently randomly.
Yeah. I mean, also that
Fire dude shot me a lot.
That whole dungeon was from the point in this game when they thought their game needed to be harder, and they were wrong. They were so wrong.
Well, and I guess that goes back to the whole rule discussion in Guild Wars 2 1.0. I feel like in that initial design, they looked at the data about other MMOs that were out there and interpreted it wrong. What I mean by that is like they looked at the data and it says, oh, all of these games struggle to find tanks. All of these games struggle to sometimes find healers. We'll make a game that doesn't make anybody play a tank or a healer. And that's absolutely data you could look at because all of these dungeon queue systems have trouble with either healers or tanks. But like the reality, having played one of those roles, is people don't do it because people are horrible. Like tanking for random people is horrible. Like people are toxic as shit. And you don't want to tank for people that you don't have a connection to. Like I will tank whenever for my friends. Like I enjoy that. I have enjoyed tanking in Final Fantasy XIV because it is a significantly less toxic community. But if you looked at WoW, you saw that these are 2 roles that are constantly having trouble getting filled. Let's make a game that doesn't make anybody play those roles.
Also, it turns out that having healers is important.
Yeah.
Well, but like,
having someone who can at least passively make your bar go back up a little bit is incredibly useful.
But fractals didn't go in when the game went in, and I think that represents basically a reboot of their thinking.
Well,
But their dungeons were harder than the initial fractals.
Mm-hmm.
Explorable dungeon paths are harder than fractals.
Yes.
Early fractals, anyway.
Like the consensus seems to be that one we did last night is comparable to a tier 3 or 4 fractal.
Interesting. I thought that also...
Yeah.
again, I understand. I like the grind. I like feeling the game bite back. I had a lot of fun last night.
I mean, when it wasn't being incredibly frustrating escort quest, I did too.
That encounter made me upset, but other than that, I kind of like the thing.
I like the challenge, but I like it when it's like, hey, this is messaged properly. Not like the frustration when I get frustrated is like, this is failing and there's no sense of how we could possibly improve this other than hoping we get lucky. And
AKA Guild Wars 2. Not Guild Wars 2, Secret World.
Yeah. Like,
because we got into that situation in Secret World. We're like, we have beat our heads against this wall all night long, and I don't know what needs to shift in order for us to win.
Or alternately, the other one that gets me, and the other one that drives me absolutely bonkers is if I go in playing the thing I want to play, and it's the wrong thing, but there was no way for me to know that.
Right, like the whole blood healer thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the coolest of the healer classes, but apparently it's the wrong one.
No, you should want to punch people.
Because that's exactly what healers want to do, is punch people.
Yeah, and at least Wars 2 will allow you to switch up your utilities and change weapons between fights if you realize that, I really want to be able to do this thing.
Yeah. But I mean, I definitely hit the point where I was like, I'm just here on the wrong class.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's turbo frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, that was the point where I was super frustrated, where I was like, I just shouldn't be here on this class. Like, I'm just doing the wrong thing.
A group coordination thing, because like, if you were going to come on that class, I should have come on some other support class.
In the Secret World?
No, in Guild Wars 2.
Okay, I was about to say no, because in the Secret World...
No, in the Secret World, it's possible to make objectively correct choices that you could not fix without basically a month of grinding.
Yeah. No, he was absolutely correct, because we tried it. Like, I brought the Fist Healer, and it was ridiculously... Like, it was night and day. The specs were not even close. The balance was completely...
We've had this experience in other games as well. See also Guild Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In which you and I struggled to heal a raid fight, and then we brought in a Sage, and everything was super easy.
Oh, right, yeah.
But yeah, I had the frustration of like, the thing that I'm even here to do is conceptually the correct thing and the thing we need, but like, it was just wrong, and there's no way for me to know that it was wrong up front.
Until you get to the end and find out you made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awful. It is why I'm like... I think the idea of the Guild Wars 1 thing is really cool, and I just worry that, like, when you have all of this power at your hands, at your fingertips, and then the designers are like, well, you have all this power... let me design all of this content that expects you to be optimized within this completely obtuse system.
Honestly, yes.
That happened.
That happened a lot.
That happened, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
It was called Season 1.
Oh, I mean Guild Wars 1.
Oh, okay.
And it was called the entirety of the entire game.
Yes, Guild Wars 1 gave enemies the same capabilities they gave you, almost all of the time. There are a few exceptions for, like, big bosses, like Shiro Tagachi has an ability that you can't have. It makes him super strong.
But that just means that the NPCs had hyper-optimized versions of builds?
Mostly they didn't, but like, this might be an area that spams a bunch of disease. Hope you brought your disease clearing. This might be an area that is packed with interrupts, so maybe don't bring any long cast spells or you're going to have a miserable time.
Yeah, so you've got to like continually change your build based on where you are.
And while I think this is cool, it did mean that you couldn't know that ahead of time.
Yes.
That is cool, and I can see how that would be very frustrating.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because again, I actually think that's really cool, provided I can know ahead of time. And it's like, yes, I could read a guide, but I'm not excited about reading how to do things on the internet before I even do them.
I mean, so this was where, like, we've had a couple of cool moments, I want to say all this week, where we've been doing these dungeons, these explorable dungeon paths with 4 people, and they are very clearly designed to have 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
4 is... I'm not going to say 4 is the minimum you can do these dungeon paths with, because I've seen the exploits. But, like, there are a lot of things where it's like, you have 5 people, so 4 people stand here, and the 5th person goes off and does this thing.
Yep.
Well, okay, except we only have 4 people. We've had to come up with a lot of creative solutions to, like, how can we all be standing over here and yet still doing damage to this thing way over here? Okay, well, how can we summon some ads and send them over there? Or, in one case, I drop a bunch of turrets where the door opens and then the turrets deal all of the damage to the, like, item we need to destroy.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a bunch of really, really cool... Like, that part's really fun.
I do enjoy digging deep into the kits for nonsense like that, even though it is clearly not the intended design.
Mm-hmm. But, like, the idea of digging deep into your kit and trying to find the answers with what you've got, I like that.
Yeah.
The issue there is a little bit, some classes have deeper kits than others.
Yes. And, like, there's some issues of, boy, is it good that we have Ash in these groups, because I do not know my kit as well as he does. Like, just gonna say that I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of my own class that would be required for me to know what's good and what's not. But that's one of those things where, like, yes, the ooze was miserable, but, like, getting it to the point where we're like, okay, we need to be doing something where we are knocking back these enemies so that we can protect this stupid ooze. How can we do that? What are good tools for that?
Apparently the best class to do that is a Revenant, which I didn't know until I looked it up afterward. Because they have a big giant projectile stop aura that they can move around at will.
Oh, that would be immensely useful, yeah. Because all the elemental attacks are projectiles.
So is it just basically you ended up in a scenario where you just need a 5th warm body?
In a lot of cases.
You don't have a 5th warm body?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there are multiple dungeon paths we've done now where 4 people need to stand in 4 places, and if any of them gets too far from that spot, a thing deactivates, and a 5th person needs to go kill something in a spot, a decent distance away from the other 4.
It sounds like I need to figure out a time when y'all are on and come on my Revenant, since I am actually enjoying the Revenant right now.
Yeah.
Even though the Revenant isn't anywhere near as progressed as the Warrior was.
I mean, my Revenant was sitting at 80 with no gear, so I bought gear for my Revenant today, and now it's caught up.
Yeah, like, that's sort of the fun thing. Like, I only really seriously play 2.5 classes, but I have an 80 of every class that is geared up competently and caught up, because all of the stuff that, like, really matters is
account wide. Yeah.
So, like, my glider skills, my masteries, my mounts, all of that is account wide. P.S. I got my dragon. I unlocked all of the dragon stuff, and just all of my characters have this dragon now, and it's awesome. The speed at which I can go and unlock skill trees on a new character is great. And also, I'm finding all of the places where the other mounts are still useful.
That's
not totally obviate every other mount I have.
Every mount has a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are to be wrecking balls, apparently. I just unlocked the ability to do that today.
That beetle is great.
Roller beetle is hilarious.
I was going to say, one of the nice things about this game is the second best set of gear, which is the gear I believe all of us are using, is usually... What? Oh, do you have Ascended gear now?
I have a full set of Ascended gear on my Elementalist.
Oh, nice. Is usually about somewhere from... Most of the gear can be purchased for less than 5 gold.
Sometimes significantly less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are some specialty there are some specialty things that are going to be miserable.
Jewelry is kind of a pain.
Interesting. I didn't have a problem with jewelry, so I picked up a full set of soldiers' jewelry and cleric jewelry, and those were mostly pretty reasonable.
Okay.
Again,
it's also dependent on the prefix.
Yeah, what prefix you're looking for. But even like berserkers mostly seem berserkers seems reasonable if you aren't actually getting proper berserkers, which is the other thing that I found interesting. Is there's a lot of
drop gear with the same stats.
Yeah, so you don't have to get the expensive stuff necessarily. Like you can just get the cheap stuff. But yeah, it's pretty easy to get a character ready to do high-end content in this game.
It's shockingly easy.
Well, and if you boost, they basically just give you a set of gear too.
They do.
It's decent. Like it was soldier gear on my Revenant.
Yeah,
it's not gear.
It's not fantastic, but it's good enough to to do content with.
So my one complaint I would say is a lot of, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's required, but to feel really great about a lot of the modern specs, you really wanted elite specializations.
Yeah, which is kind of unfortunate, but because it takes a while to level up an elite specialization.
It does.
I mean,
or you go to the hateful zone, or you go to the Path of Fire zones, which are less hateful than the Heart of Thorns zones.
I think I've gotten that.
I've gotten to the point where I can do it in an afternoon for one, but if I want both, that takes a lot longer.
It takes me about 90 minutes to unlock one at this point.
I'm curious what your... well, you also have all of the mounts, right? I only have the Raptor.
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I do with the Springer. The Springer is kind of really important.
Once you have the Springer, that speeds it up a lot. Because that makes nearly every hero point in Tyria and a lot of them in Heart of Thorns just super easy to get to.
I should get the Springer.
Now, admittedly, a lot of hero points in Heart of Thorns, you have to fight something awful, but there are a decent number that you just have to touch.
I've become a lot better at fighting awful things. You know what I will say, though, Belle? One of the things that's really helped me get better at this game is playing games like Destiny.
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
Because in a lot of like older games, it's like you mostly just sit around and you press your buttons. Destiny requires you to be a lot more aware of what is going on around you to make sure that you are always trying to be in as optimal a position as possible. And being in a good position in this game, not getting caught out of position, is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I die a lot in Destiny, just saying. I die a lot in Destiny.
And that was, I think, the big moment for us on the oil fight is we need to be grouped up. Like,
which is weird.
Yeah. Which is weird in this game.
Yeah, because usually you want to spread out, so you're not all standing in a whole bunch of AoEs at once.
Uh-huh. But yeah, being aware of your own active mitigation, like everyone, like the tagline is like, no one's a tank, no one's a DPS, everyone's everything, but it's like,
that's bullshit.
It's bullshit, but you are also kind of, you are expected to be able to do some active mitigation of damage on your own, no matter who you are. So
I don't think we have any time to go into a real topic, but I do have like a little aside that kind of branches off of this. So the thing that Guild Wars 1 did that was really interesting was spells and basically a deck building game. Another game that did something really interesting with its spells, but also didn't entirely carry it off successfully, was EverQuest 2. And the thing that EverQuest 2 did was make the spells themselves something that you quested for. And the problem with it, though, was there were just flat out inferior spells in the world. Like, you had the basic spells that you learn just from a vendor, and then you could get crafted spells that were significantly better, and then there were just like masterwork spells that were the best versions of the spell that dropped in in-game content. And it made it real awkward when 3 people playing the same class weren't necessarily guaranteed to have exactly the same spells.
I mean,
that reminds me of PSO more than anything else, which I recognize came later.
Yeah, but it's similar. Like, but like, so imagine like you're using an ability, but like you can get somebody to craft it, and they can craft like 3 different versions of it, and each better version requires more difficult materials to get to. And then there were like elite versions that dropped in raids. And it was kind of cool in some aspect that like for the classes that weren't as weapon driven, it gave them something to seek after in a raid that wasn't just a stat stick, because like these elite versions of the spells performed better. So like it was a quality of life thing, but it was madness to try and deal with like having all this variance in a toolkit that somebody was bringing to an encounter. But I still think it's a cool idea. I just don't think they did a good job of carrying it off. But I don't know how to make that work in an environment where, because like that's always the challenge with casters versus melee, is for a melee character, that weapon upgrade means a hell of a lot more than a new staff means to a caster.
I mean, there are some attempts at addressing things like this. Guild Wars 2, where weapons are weapons, like caster weapons and melee weapons do the same thing, except it's relatively flat stats, mean that that's not really a thing. You don't get upgrades that way.
Right.
But Diablo is a case where that is a thing.
Yeah, and you unlock new subtle variants as you level, and your items change the way that you use your abilities. I think I would like to see more of that in MMOs, to where like I get this item, and this item fundamentally changes the way my build works.
I always love that.
I mean,
and to some extent, like WoW had that during Legion, but God, that was a mess.
Did.
Like the acquisition
the execution
of
was bad.
legendaries.
The idea was there.
Legendaries were really cool. Like it was basically Diablo legendaries, but the acquisition was a mess, and like it was too hard to get them. It was unpredictable in which one you got. You maybe like got a shitty one, and then you realize it's going to be forever until you see another one. Like I think it would have worked had they given the players some kind of ability to focus what they're going after.
You mean like Diablo does?
Yeah, well, I mean, like Diablo is a situation where they're showering so much loot upon you that imperfect items are acceptable because you're getting so much of it. It's the problem
but
that
also you can Kadala farm.
Yeah,
and Cube farm.
Right. You can help fight RNG with specific expenditures of currencies. But like that was the problem with Anthem 2, is like the items were so rare that getting a bad one felt horrible.
Yeah. Like I really, really love the, hey, you get an item, you can get items that totally affect totally dramatically alter your play style, but they need to happen frequently enough that if you get one that isn't, it's not a total downer.
And so the thing I always think of when I think of this is, again, I've harped about it. I got forced to take a Perdition's Blade, and it was a great dagger. It made me much more effective in raid, but I didn't really enjoy playing with daggers. If I could have just had something where at that point I could have changed my spec when I wasn't in raid, I would have probably been a lot less hesitant to take that weapon.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing is like my enjoyment, one of the biggest reasons that I'm way more into Guild Wars 2 than I was before is
Build templates.
Yeah, the addition of build templates.
Which Guild Wars 1 had the whole charm.
Right. But like there's like 3 or 4 different things that I'm interested in doing on my Elementalist. There's like 2 to 3 that I'm interested in doing on my Mesmer. But trying to maintain, it's like, well, okay, if I want to switch, I've got to figure out which gear goes where and remember it and dedicate some inventory slots for all the weapons and armor and remember how I set this build up. Whereas now it's like, I have 2 sets of gear. The gear sits in those build templates, not in my inventory. And I've got multiple build templates, so I can just click a button. Click a button for my gear and a button for my build, which could be more streamlined, but for the moment. And now I'm playing my class, this class that I enjoy. I'm playing it a totally different way, and it means that I'm way more excited about experimenting because there's no overhead to me in me so doing.
Other than the fact that once you start to get too many slots of gear, then you need to start buying additional build slots.
Yeah, but like if I want to pay some extra, I can pay some amount of gems and unlock up to 6. And like even my favorite classes, I don't think have 6 different builds I want to play on them.
I don't need I think I'm gonna. I don't think I care as much about builds as much as I do about inventory space, and so I'm more likely to store my. Because you start with 3 builds, and I think I could get by with 3 builds, but I do need a bunch of different inventory space because they all use different stats.
Yeah, but it makes me more interested in investing in multiple sets of gear. It makes that like, oh, I got a cool item. Like I got a sweet looking. I got a sweet looking sword. I want to make sword builds.
I mean, that literally happened to me yesterday. And while I am reworking a different build into this build, it was a thing.
Tinkering is super fun.
Tinkering is fun. It is one of those things that I really enjoy how much stuff is account bound so that I feel a little like alting is a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, like the flexibility of being able to swap things up pretty easily is also nice because I mean that's one of the things that I like about Diablo 3 versus other games of this type.
Basically every other game of this type.
Yeah, exactly. Like
choices should be permanent. They were in Diablo 2.
I can sit down and like, okay, so like right now I am a leapy smashy barbarian and I'm using this to collect gear to be a whirlwind barbarian for this season. And like when I get the gear, it will take me like all of a minute to reconfigure myself and cost me nothing to do so to be this other spec.
Yeah.
Like it's just unlocked at my character, like
which is super nice. Great because then it's like then I don't get bored. Because I get bored when I'm playing the same thing over and over and over again. I want something different. And like currently I'm playing I played through Heart of Thorns, I played a whole bunch of it's not Bounder. Daredevil. Daredevil Thief with a staff because they gave me a class they gave me a staff fighter class and I've wanted that in a game and it's great. It's super fun. And I played a whole bunch of it. And now I want to play something different. I want to play a sniper thief because I can do that. And like, is it good? Probably not, but it's good enough. And if I need to go back to the thing that I know is actually legitimately good, I can. And it's trivial. I hit a button.
Yeah, and I really like that aspect of design, honestly. And I'd love to see more games do that.
Yeah, I mean, make it easy for me to tinker and try new things and give me a really low barrier to entry, and I will be doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Counterpoint to that is that if you can do that, then it feels like build decisions have no meaning. I don't. So quite frankly, I hate that argument. I hate that argument with a passion. But that is the counter argument.
Yeah, but do they need to? That's the thing.
No, I don't think so.
Need to?
I think that I think that much like the thing from before about, hybrid classes and pure classes have to total the same number of points, as it were. I think that's an old, outdated, and wrong design philosophy.
I would just argue very quickly, because there is a little bit of feeling like when you're playing a rogue and you're staring at these other classes who can be both a close range DPS just as good as you, but also they don't have to spend time leveling up everything else. If we're going to go with that route, then maybe we should have everyone be hybrid.
Yes.
Yes.
100%. Mm-hmm. That's the more things that you can do with a low barrier to entry, the more invested you can become, because the less likely it is you're going to be like, I'm really tired of backstabbing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. I'm really tired of pressing 2 buttons all the time. So
the RPers in the world will hate me for this, but my personal preference would be that everything works like Final Fantasy XIV, to where you just have a character and you can adopt any class or any spec or anything that you so choose.
Well, or the classes and specs be account bound.
Right. Yeah.
So you can have multiple characters if you want multiple looks and stuff, but
I'd be fine with that. Like the main reason that
I think we had this conversation one day. It was like, I would love it if your character was just a series of cosmetics, and all of your stuff that is associated with that character is account bound.
Yeah,
I sometimes see my characters as being good at different things.
Yeah,
so I like PSO2, so titles are account wide. So I can have this character be the good hunter and this character be the good summoner, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I get very into the visuals of my characters, and so I have this character. I probably wouldn't play more than one thing, but I would I would play my Mesmer and Elementalist as the same character. I'd be fine by that. There's my caster. I would want my thief to be different, but my thief and my revenant could be the same. It's and being able to just swap, maybe I wouldn't choose to do that. I would associate this character model with this other thing, but
or what if you literally just have one character and your builds are not only shifting functionality but looks and appearances, and
because names are important.
Your name would swap too. You would have a build, and so you would have an account.
What's the difference between going to the character select screen?
Oh yeah, just never. If you're just saying meld the character select screen into an in-game menu, whatever.
Never character select screen doesn't exist.
That's great. I would absolutely do that thing.
You just made my life more convenient because I can swap characters.
So I'm going to change to this build, and that build has this name.
That build is actually a different character,
and it has this appearance, and it's this assemblage of gear.
Yeah. It's basically a character select screen at the thing.
But everything exists at an account level. So if you want a new appearance, you name that appearance and that becomes a quote unquote character name. But you have an account name that everything's associated with. You're just playing a persona.
Yeah, that's already the case behind the scenes.
Right. But it would make it so much. I don't know. That's the one thing that I really like about a situation where you have one account and everything unlocks, is it never feels like you're doing something on the wrong character or counterproductive to your end goals.
That is one thing that I feel like even without having gone all the way down that rabbit hole, I think Guild Wars 2 does really well. I never feel like there's a wrong character for me to bring to things.
The only case I feel that way is basically World Complete.
Yeah.
And I wish World Complete was account bound.
It's mostly not, so you can do it more than once.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I like...
Since you have to do it for legendary weapons.
Yeah, I like to do the stuff more than once. I'm playing through some story stuff, because it's been a while and I don't remember it, on a few different characters.
It'd be really cool if we could do Scarlet's War again.
You can.
They're working on
that.
it.
Characters.
they're finally adding parts of that back as best they can now to allow people to play it.
Yeah, 4 of the missions are back in the game. Maybe we'll get more in the future.
Have they been revamped?
I have no idea.
I don't know. They're part of season 4.
I didn't play them the first time, so
the current
Exactly.
season 5, really.
Now, granted, you have to get pretty far in the story to be able to get there.
I mean, the thing that, and the chapter that they're part of is free right now, so you should have it.
don't you have to have basically beat the main story of the game to get Scarlet's War unlocked?
No.
I mean,
No,
right now,
you
Scarlet
jump
War
around
is
in the story
fixed.
however much you want, regardless of how much it makes sense or doesn't make sense. So you can just jump straight to the chapter of this is where the Scarlet's War recap is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just skip to, I mean, you can just be like, nah, I don't actually feel like doing the original story. Or, hey, I don't feel like doing the original story or Heart of Thorns. I'm just going to go straight to Path of Fire. And, you know, that you may or may not be able to keep up with what's going on in the story. They try to... Do they even try? They might even...
They don't really even try.
Yeah, okay, never mind.
They try to give you a season 1 recap, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and it's
also bad.
It really is. But yeah, so the parts of season 1 that we have access to at this point are a recap and 4 missions that are now in season 5. And you can go straight to that chapter if you want. And also a dungeon adventure path that is the one that we ran last night, which is oof.
It's fun.
It's rough.
It's rough.
It's a little rough.
Well, I think that is probably time, and we have run a little over. Any final thoughts?
I would love to see a game like Guild Wars 1 system again.
I'd even take an HD remake of Guild Wars 1. Even take an HD remake of Guild Wars 1.
That'd be nice.
With jumping.
That's that. Still required.
I was gonna say, but if they put jumping, wouldn't they have to update it so that they could add jumping puzzles?
No comment.
Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.